For 8 long years, no one knew that Rawson's special recipe came from the women who never made it back home. In the dark corners of America's forgotten highways, there's a man named Rawson. To strangers, he's just the guy who sells meat on a stick, smoky, tender, and cheap. But behind the smell of roasted flesh hides something unspeakable. He lived alone in a rusted truck, parked by an abandoned field. No wife, no kids, no past. Just the sound of fire and screams that nobody heard. Until one night, he picked the wrong woman, and his secret empire of horror came crashing down. This is the story of Rawson, the butcher in the truck. Rawson wasn't the kind of man people noticed. In a small town off Route 17, he was simply the guy with the truck. Every evening, when the sun dipped below the grain silos and the air turned heavy with dust, Rawson's grill came alive. The smell of spice and smoke drifted through the night, a scent so rich, so comforting, that even the local sheriff stopped by once in a while for a stick or two. Folks said Rawson's meat was the best in the county. Tender, juicy, addictive. He lived out of that same truck, a rusted, dented thing with cracked paint and a sagging door. Inside, there was just a single bedroll, a lantern, and a wooden box that never seemed to open. Rawson didn't talk much. He'd smile when customers joked with him, but his eyes, dark, quiet, unreadable, always looked like they were somewhere else, somewhere far darker. Every night, after the crowd thinned and the town fell silent, he'd drive miles out, deep into the back roads, past the gas stations, and into the kind of places where streetlights don't work anymore. There he hunted. He was 56, weather-beaten, gray stubble under his chin, his clothes forever soaked in the smell of charcoal and smoke. Every day, people would see him by the roadside, grilling what he called stick meat. For $2 apiece, he'd hand you a skewer of sizzling meat wrapped in greasy foil, dripping with his secret sauce. No one ever questioned where the meat came from, because it tasted too good, not for animal, but for women nobody would miss. Runaways, drifters, the forgotten ones standing under broken motel signs, selling pieces of themselves to stay alive another night. He'd pull up slow, roll down his window and offer warmth, money, food. They always got in, and they never got out. By sunrise, Rawson would be back in town. Grill hot, music on, his hands steady as he roasted the meat that made people line up down the block. No one knew that the same fire cooking their dinner had, just hours earlier, erased the last trace of another human being. For years, girls went missing, but no one connected the dots. You see, Rawson was smart. He moved around. One night in Dallas, another week in Amarillo, sometimes even across state lines. He knew which motels didn't keep cameras, which neighborhoods didn't talk to the police. Every time someone disappeared, people blamed it on the streets. They said, she probably ran off or overdosed. No one ever suspected the man who sold them their favorite street snack, because Rawson didn't look like a killer. He looked like someone who'd been defeated by life. But Rawson's story didn't start with murder. It started with loss, and a hunger that wasn't just for food. He'd lost everything: his home, his wife, his business. And in that loneliness, something darker began to grow. People think monsters are born, but sometimes they're made by life itself. It started with a name, Carrie Dawn, a young mother of two who worked nights cleaning motel rooms near the interstate. She wasn't like the other women Rawson picked. She wasn't a sex worker. She was just tired. One night, Carrie didn't come home. Her co-workers thought maybe she found another job. But after a week, her phone went silent. Then 2 weeks, then a month. Her mother filed a report. Another one joined it, then another. By the end of that year, 5 women from the same county had vanished. No bodies, no clues, no pattern. Only one connection. They were last seen near the Route 16 roadside. Detective James Halpern took the case. A quiet man, methodical, not easily shaken. But this one, it got under his skin. He drove down to the truck stop where locals gathered, and everyone told him the same thing. You should talk to Raw. He sees everyone who passes through. When Halpern met Rawson, he saw nothing unusual, just a tired, harmless old man with a smoker's cough and a face that carried too many years. He even offered the detective a free skewer of meat. Halpern refused. Something about Rawson's eyes didn't sit right with him. Too calm, too empty. But there was no evidence. No reason to dig deeper. Halpern moved on. The case went cold, and Rawson went back to work. Night after night, grilling, selling, smiling, while his victims' faces haunted the posters nailed to every wall in town. Rawson was careful. He never kept trophies, never left behind anything that could trace back to him. He learned how to use bleach, how to burn things the right way, how to hide tracks in plain sight. But every monster makes one mistake, and Rawson's came on a night he thought would be his greatest pleasure. For 8 years, Rawson lived this double life, smiling by day, killing by night, and every year the missing persons board grew longer. But it wasn't until a single mistake, one wrong woman, that the empire of silence began to burn down. It was a Thursday night, cold, wind biting through the empty streets like a blade. Rawson had sold his last stick of meat just after 10 p.m. The smell of smoke still clung to his clothes as he drove out of town, his headlights cutting through the fog like twin knives. He wasn't hungry for food. He was hungry for something else. That night he wanted something different. Not another girl from the rundown streets. He wanted a woman who looked clean, untouched by the kind of dirt he lived in. So he drove toward the city, toward Brightfield Motel, a place where truckers met high-class escorts who didn't ask for names, only cash. And that's where he saw her. Maya. She was 27, confident, beautiful, dressed in red heels and a long black coat. She wasn't like the others Rawson usually picked. She was educated, sharp. Her eyes didn't show fear. They showed control. But to Rawson, she was a challenge, a new flavor. "You need a ride?" he asked, leaning out of his truck window. She hesitated, but money was money. After a pause too long for comfort, she nodded and stepped in. The second she sat down, something felt wrong. The air smelled heavy, like burnt metal. The back seat was dark, but she could make out strange shapes. A bucket, a rope, a black tarp folded neatly. "Where are we going?" she asked. Rawson smiled. "Just somewhere quiet." Her heart began to pound. As they drove deeper into the countryside, the city lights vanished. The road turned to gravel, then dirt. Maya's instinct screamed, "Stop the car!" I said, "Stop." "Relax," Rawson murmured, his voice calm, almost gentle. "I just want to talk." "Talk my ass," she snapped. "Pull over or I'm getting out." That's when she reached for the door handle, but it was locked from the inside. Rawson's eyes glimmered in the rearview mirror. "You ain't going nowhere," he whispered. Maya froze. Her breath quickened. She turned and saw it. The back of the truck, half open, and something pale, dangling. A hand. A human hand. She screamed, but before she could move, Rawson lunged across the seat and hit her hard across the face. The world went black. When Maya woke up, she was tied to a post in the back of the truck. The smell of gasoline burned her nose. In the corner, she could see blackened remains, bones, ashes, and something that looked like a skull with teeth still intact. Rawson was humming. Sweetly, he was pouring fuel into a steel drum, preparing for another fire. You kill them," Maya gasped, struggling against the ropes. Rawson turned and smiled. "Not kill. Transformed people don't care about the living, but they'll line up for the dead. My meat feeds them, makes them happy. They'll miss me when I'm gone." He laughed. That's when Maya realized. He was completely insane. He walked toward her slowly, holding a matchbook. "I'll make you the best one yet," he whispered. But when he turned to grab the gas can, Maya acted fast. She twisted her wrists, scraping the rope against a jagged nail on the post until it snapped. By the time Rawson turned back, she was gone. He ran outside shouting, searching in the dark. But it was too late. Maya was sprinting through the woods barefoot, her hands bleeding, lungs burning with cold air. She didn't look back. Within 15 minutes, she reached a highway. She flagged down a passing car, a young couple, and begged for help. Police swarmed the site that night. Detective Halpern visited him one last time. The same detective who once refused Rawson's free meat. He wanted to hear the truth, to know what made this man cross that line. When Halpern sat down, Rawson looked up and smiled. "You came back," he said softly. "I told you, people always come back when they get hungry." Halpern's hands clenched. He forced his voice steady. "How many, Rawson? How many did you kill?" When they opened Rawson's truck, what they found made even the toughest officers cry. Dozens of teeth, bones, burn marks, ID cards of missing women, and in the freezer, bags of cooked meat, labeled by date. Rawson was arrested the next morning, sitting quietly beside his cold grill, smoking a cigarette. When asked how many people he'd killed, he looked up and said, "I lost count after 30. The morning after his arrest, the small town of Brindley was unrecognizable. Police tape covered the old truck stop. News vans lined the dusty road. The scent of smoke still lingered, faint but enough to turn every stomach that passed by. Reporters called him the stick meat killer. For years, families had filed missing persons reports, daughters, mothers, runaways, and every case had gone cold. Until now, they finally had a name. Rawson Clay, age 56. Former butcher, drifter, monster hiding in plain sight. At first, Rawson refused to speak. He sat in the interrogation room with his arms crossed, staring at the table, silent as stone. But when they brought in the photos, the remains, the grill, the bagged meat samples, something cracked inside him. He started to laugh. A low, hoarse laugh that didn't sound human anymore. "You people ate good, didn't you?" he muttered. "You loved it. You said it was sweet." The detective slammed the table. "You're telling me you fed human flesh to people?" Rawson smiled. "I didn't feed them anything they didn't already crave." Silence. Then almost proudly he said it. "I lost count after 30. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. Survivors' families filled the seats. Maya, the woman who escaped, sat in the front row, clutching a cross in her hand, shaking as she watched him enter. He looked thinner, older, like the life had drained from his skin. But his eyes, those dark, empty eyes, still had that quiet fire. The prosecutor laid out everything. Evidence, photos, confessions. Every detail more horrifying than the last. When they read the list of the missing, 47 names, Rawson smiled again. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just said, "They're still with me." The jury took less than an hour. Guilty. Rawson Clay was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge called him a predator who turned humanity into his menu. As officers led him away, a reporter shouted, "Why, Rawson? Why did you do it?" He stopped, turned his head slightly and whispered, "Because people only taste real when they're afraid." That was his last public statement. Rawson died 4 years later in prison. Heart failure, alone, in the same silence he once hunted in. But even now, that small town still remembers the smell of smoke, and the taste no one can ever forget. Evil doesn't always live in the shadows. Sometimes it smiles at you through a food truck window. Rawson Clay wasn't a ghost story. He was real, a man no one looked at twice, because monsters rarely look like monsters. And maybe that's the scariest part. If one person had asked questions sooner, if someone had followed that smell, maybe dozens of lives could have been saved. But in towns like Brindley, people prefer silence over truth, and silence is where evil thrives. What do you think drove Rawson to do it? Was it madness, hunger, or something darker? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this keep you up at night, hit subscribe, because next week's case is even darker. This is Hamer's Story, where every story is real and every secret has a name.